Transcending Barriers Atlanta is a wonderful nonprofit and the highlighted charity for the broken brain for this month. They specialize in helping citizens of Atlanta who are Black and transgendered to address legal issues. They help with advocacy. This is a population of people who are disproportionately hit with legal issues, as well as having to struggle through legal ramifications of things going through transition and other things like that. And they do a lot to help support those individuals. As you know, I love sharing nonprofits with you. I'm actually interviewing someone who is going to tell us about the nonprofit where she works today as well, and how that's related to addiction. So very, very excited to share this with you. As always, if you join the Patreon during this month, then 50% of your donation will go to Transcending Barriers Atlanta for the duration of your membership. As long as you're a member, go to transcendingbarriersatl.org to learn more. And enjoy the show.
The Broken Brain.
There it goes. That's right. It was already recording for the note taker. That's why I didn't make the little thing I was waiting for. How are we supposed to know that we're being recorded, except that it told us earlier and I forgot. So there we go.
Whoops.
Welcome, everybody, back to The Broken Brain. It's me, Dwight, your host. And speaking of host, we're going to be talking about some things that are really near and dear to my heart. Everybody knows how much we talk about addiction on here and recovery from that, as well as getting words out, public education, and podcasting, for crying out loud. I am lucky to have a lot of podcasters that join, but today we're going to be talking specifically about using not just that, but any mediums to get voices heard about addiction and recovery. My guest today is Christin Day, who is the Communications and Outreach Manager for Crossroads, Inc., a residential treatment center, and the host and creator of Recovery on Air podcast. Christin, thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I think ours was almost like an accidental connection. I think I just saw you come up with some post you made on LinkedIn, and I was like, that looks cool. Let's talk. And you were like, sure. And, you know, podcasters are like that.
Absolutely.
We're all very friendly folks, I think. Well, maybe not all. That would probably be unfair to say all podcasters are friendly folks.
Right.
Let's list the least friendly podcasters we can think. No, just kidding. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do. And and how did you get into this thing?
So, like I said, my name is Christin Day. My sobriety date is 11/22/17. So I have a little over 7 years sober. Addiction and, recovery is a big part of my life today. I always say that I scream it. I recover out loud so others don't have to die in silence, and I got into recovery back in 2015, and then I had to go back out and test the waters a little bit more, and then I came back in 2017 with both feet in this time. And at that point, like I had already, I lost my children, my rights were severed, my daughter was adopted, and the guilt and the shame from that was just unbearable. But this time jumping in 2017, I wasn't doing it to appease anybody. I wasn't doing it to appease DCS. I wasn't doing it to appease my family so that I could see the kids. Like, I was finally doing it for myself. And I always say, like, good kids are a good motivator, but you're never going to stay sober for them. And I'm living proof of that. I literally had everything in the palm of my hand. I had my 3-week reunification date with my daughter for her to come back to the house and be reunified with me. And DCS had thrown one more thing at me and changed the date, and it pushed me over the edge. And I ended up with a needle back in my arm, and I went back on that relapse for a year and a half. Wow. So yeah, it was a lot. But I jumped back in, like I said, with both feet in, and like I said, recovery is a huge part of my life. I do this from sun up to sundown. I started working in recovery, probably I was like 9 months sober. And I ended up getting a job at Crossroads, and I was the first person that they seen when they walk in. So like the face of Crossroads, I walk in, I've got all different colored hair, tattoos, and they're like, oh my gosh, So I would sign them in. And then a year later, I got promoted to admissions coordinator, and I did that for a little while. And then I had to go out and test the waters in the behavioral health field. And I wanted to see what else was out there. I went and worked for a couple more treatment centers, and I worked for an art therapy place for a couple years, which was amazing. Like, it was so much fun, and just art definitely heals. And I got to do that for a little bit, and then a job opportunity came out, and it was for the communications and outreach manager. And I was presented with, being able to do a podcast and getting to, go and do outreach. And that's my jam. Like, that's what I do. Even without getting paid for it, that's what I do. So it was a godsend. And it was all God. And I came back to Crossroads, and I've been here almost a year. So like I said, it was all God, the way that it all played out. And I'm super happy with it. So I got to really turn the podcast into what I wanted, and having different people on there. Last week I recorded a podcast for equine therapy.
Cool.
She's a therapist, and she does equine therapy. And I've only done one session of equine therapy because it was at a networking event. So being able to hear the other aspect of that, and what that looks like and how healing it is amazing. I have an attorney coming on. He's a federal prosecutor, and he deals a lot with addiction and DUIs and drug offenses. So we're going to talk about that. And I had the executive director of all DOC in the state of Arizona. That was super tricky. That was a lot of fun, but there was a lot that came to it because he is so high up in the state. He had to have bodyguards with him, and they had to come sweep the building. Wow. Yeah. So I was I was blown away by it, but it was awesome, and I get to go back into the jails and the prisons and actually bring meetings in there. So having him on, and the things that he's doing in the world right now, or in the state of Arizona, is just amazing, and being able to touch on that, and it's great, man. I love it.
It's the thing that's my favorite part of podcasting is the people that you get to meet and the things that you get to learn about that are going on.
Absolutely.
Especially when they're good. Obviously, we learn about a lot of things that are not as good, but well, and trying to bring that education piece. You had mentioned earlier how when we finally have something click, right, in the recovery orientation to say, okay, what is it that makes me do it for me and for being healthy, and that's the goal. And it sounds like you're getting to interview a lot of people and maybe blend together the outreach and education with some the, if it's Department of Corrections, we're talking about court-ordered treatment, or at least. And I'm one of those, my experience working with a ton of people has been that, being court-ordered or having some of those pressures is not mutually exclusive from finding your path and doing it for yourself.
Right.
However, it definitely can overshadow that as well when you do have that. And as you put it, sometimes the stress, sounds like you had that experience, and sometimes the stress and trauma of dealing with the system can serve as a trigger as well as something that hopefully get us on track. So it must be
But
interesting to work with that now.
it really is. And like, even like the whole correctional piece, or even, the county jails, like, getting to go back into the county jail, I get to go into the same pod that I was locked up in 20 years ago. And I get to share a message of hope to these girls every Sunday and letting them know, like, I was you. I was here 20 years ago in the same seat that you are, wearing the same clothes, except I wore stripes. Now they have orange. And, like, I was you and you are me. Like, we are no different. And just because I'm on this side of it doesn't mean that I haven't been through what you've been through, and my biggest thing is just showing others that you can do anything you put your mind to, but it takes work. The stuff isn't handed to you on a silver platter or, here you go. Like, you have to put in the work to do it. Like getting badged for the jails and the prisons, like that took a lot. And that's, it takes a lot to put in that work in the background checks and going to take your picture. And I went through a little bit of, stuff with that, because like corrections holds their volunteers to a status of like, you're not allowed to have colored hair. You're not allowed to have piercings. Like, things have to be covered up. And I'm like, but seriously, like what is that hurting? So, I got to push through a couple of those things, and I got my picture taken, thank God. But,
I was going to say, how'd you get picked? Because unless you're like, what, color your hair each time you go in?
Right. So yeah. I'm 2 years into this badging now, and every year I've had to go get my picture taken. And every year I have a problem, and they tell me, like, your hair can't be green. It was green last year. This year it's blue. And it has to be a regular hair color. And I contacted, Thornell, which is the executive director. And I said, listen, like, I'm not asking for special privileges. I'm not. But what I want to know is, like, is there something in your policies and procedures that is stating this? And if so, I guess when it comes to March of 2026, I will make sure my hair is blonde and it's not a different hair color, so that I can, not have these problems.
Well, but even just asking the question, see, and this is where self-advocacy comes
Absolutely.
in as well. It's so funny. I had a friend of mine who he applied years ago for a correctional therapist job, and he didn't get it. And he's one of those who does this very healthy thing that I don't do, that I've never done, that when he doesn't get a job, he would ask, when they tell him, so could you give me any feedback on why I didn't, why I wasn't the right candidate, which is very good and healthy, but I would never, some of us are too fragile.
Like no, absolutely.
Like I don't want to know why you don't want me. But, but he said the feedback he got was, well, your hair is really long. And it's like, what? Like, seriously? So, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting, but I guess this goes into a little bit of the idea of saying, do we sort of find, well, it could just be individualism, or just basically like someone who can come in and relate to people. Absolutely. And who is an individual, not necessarily because they have either long or green hair or whatever, but just coming and being ourselves, where there is maybe a dehumanizing natural, is a risk of a correctional environment.
Right.
I don't feel like a human being, sort of thing. Yeah.
And they're not going to open up to you. Like, I can't tell you how many times, like, even doing art therapy, like, we would deal with children that were in the system, or children that were dealing with parents that were incarcerated and stuff. And because of the way that I look, and like, they kind of like look up to me like, oh my God, she's so cool looking. Like, she has tattoos, and, they open up to me more. And, like, I'm just a normal human being. I just like to express myself loudly. I wear different colors in my hair. I have lots of piercings and tattoos, and I own a tattoo shop. So
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
yes,
That's
yes.
interesting.
So my husband and I own a tattoo shop also. So
Is the do you get your podcast logo onto people? Is that no?
listen, I mean, who's down to get it? I'm just kidding.
That'd be a
I
great
wouldn't even.
series. That'd be a great
It
series of
would.
tattoos, right? And like that would
Well,
be a
my
good.
husband is wanting to do a podcast because he's also in recovery.
Uh-huh.
So he wants to do a podcast at the shop and talk about recovery and then tattooing and all kinds of stuff. So we're coming up with some ideas.
I
We'll
like
see.
this. Yeah, this
Yeah,
is really good. I remember back when I started doing this podcast about 10 or 11 years ago, there weren't very many that were very specifically about therapy and things like that and
right.
addiction and that at the time. And those that were, frankly, were mostly academic kind of approaches where it was like
Hmm.
broadcasts of a lecture for a class or just very textbooky kind of thing. And now there's so many like the vibrant, passionate kind of people out there who are doing it. And I appreciate, what people are bringing to it.
For sure.
What are as you approach it with your show? What are some things that you feel like are the most important things to put out there for people? And I guess you've got listeners that you're trying to teach about addiction recovery who are in it, and then maybe people who are just tuning in that are either interested or have loved ones or what do
Right.
you try to get across mostly?
So more than anything, I would like to hit the people that have been in addiction that are maybe even struggling right now, like and hear something. It's like being in an AA meeting or an NA meeting, like they're resonating with that speaker and they're feeling it right then and there, and they're like, wow, like they're telling my story. So I really like to to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, things that have happened. Like I'm an open book, so I share everything. I don't have I really don't have any filter. I share about it all.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I feel like, getting the ones on the podcast mostly, are friends of mine that I've, been in recovery with, and I've seen them go down, a dark path, and then they've totally turned their life around and they're doing something completely different and just spreading hope. And then like I said, I have the executive director of DOC come on, and the things that are going on in Arizona right now, and the way that he is reimagining corrections. Like reentry is a big thing out here, and bringing in like the MAP services and stuff like that, and then them getting out. Like I participate in the parole orientation. So every Thursday when inmates get out, they have to go to meet their parole officer. So we do an orientation, and there's like resources. There's probably like 30 of us that show up. And the resources that are available, the way that they're doing things now is that if you get out and say you need MAT services, they only set you up for a week of MAT services with your Suboxone or whatever. And then you have to go and see a physician.
Is that
They have
medical assisted therapy? Is that Matt?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yep. So Suboxone, methadone, Subutex. So they do that, and then they actually have the resources there that they can see the provider that day. And the other thing is telling them like, hey, sometimes when they're inmates, drugs get in there, obviously, and they come out and they're still addicted, and they need to get into treatment. So that's where I come in. I'm like, hey, I'm part of Crossroads. Like, we're residential treatment, we're IOP, we're outpatient services. Like, we work with parole, we work with probation officers, and let's get you into treatment. because honestly, them getting out, they don't want to put them back into prison. They want to help them. And that's what I love about them reimagining corrections here in the state of Arizona, is that it's not about, sending them back in. It's about addressing the problem and helping them get better.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point. It's funny when you think about it, and sometimes if people aren't as familiar with the drug use piece, I'd say, imagine this with cigarettes. And I've known many people that have not smoked a cigarette the entire time they were incarcerated. They get out and they stop at a gas station, one of the first things, and then it's like, yep, I'm right back at it. It doesn't just a period of chemical sobriety. So even if someone hasn't used, and as you put it, there are ways, of course, to get a hold of things, to intoxicants of one kind or another. And even when people don't, though, I always look at it like, if you're using for a reason, right? Most using is someone either self-medicating, goal-directed. There's at some point, and when you get rid of the drug or the alcohol or any intoxicant that is problematic, you don't get rid of the things underneath it that are driving it. Then you can
trauma,
go a long time and still pick it up again pretty fast. Yeah,
absolutely. And what we see is like inmates that are getting out, like, maybe they haven't used while they were in prison, which is good, but they get out and think that they can go back to the same amount that they were doing before, and they overdose and die.
Right? Yeah. Or it's not as if they've been in a few years, they may not be up on some of the trends on the street for fentanyl and some of those things, right?
Absolutely. And it's sad
that you didn't know or something, or all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's someone who will, whatever. And I don't know if it's poison. And as I co-host in addition to this show with a detox center in California that I help produce their podcast as well. And the owner there, Claire Wiseman, she likes to differentiate when she talks about overdoses. She'll say overdoses, and then there's also poisonings. She's like, because if you sell someone something that will kill them, something that's laced with fentanyl, you are poisoning them. They are not just overdosing themselves, right? That you've got all that. One of the things,
and I know here in Arizona, they are actually going after the people that sell the sell the dope. I've seen it where they have literally arrested the person that sold that person, and that person overdosed and died, and now they're getting charged with their murder.
Because that's murder, exactly.
It is
when you're doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it shows the fact that is not what everyone automatically thinks. It shows another one of the problems of dehumanization, of saying like, oh, someone died. Oh, they were a drug user. Well, go figure. And it's like, okay, they're a human person.
They're human though.
Yes, and also someone who was. We don't know at what stage anybody's trying to do whatever they're trying to do, but everybody's a human being. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately is, not only the kinds of trauma that are underlying, but the trauma that happens to us while abusing drugs.
In our addiction.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. That trauma then in some ways is for many people, I think is more active when you start to get sober and stop using. It's like, well, here's all the things that either I did or were done to me or happened to me, during that period of using. Certainly if someone's incarcerated, or they have things like you had with the state and the way that worked out and everything. Do you see a lot of that with people that are struggling with the trauma that came from the period of using? Yeah.
Absolutely. Me, myself. I mean, I had a lot of domestic violence that I dealt with while I was in my addiction, and I was in a horrible relationship where this man told me that I was a piece of shit and that I was never, I'd be better off dead and my kids would be better off without me, and, knocked my teeth out and stabbed me in the head with a butter knife. But I had no love for myself, and I'm not a victim to it because I allowed this to go on. I've worked through a lot of therapy, and I can't say poor me because I put myself in that situation. Mm-hmm. And I was so addicted to the drugs that I stayed in that situation, and I allowed it to go on. So But yeah, we deal with a lot of that,
Yeah.
and you see a lot of it too.
What did you find? I find that those realizations that you just mentioned of, the effect of choice, I think they're meant to be empowering, and I think they can be very empowering. It's not always the first way we feel.
Right.
That
Absolutely.
concept, oftentimes we've already said that to ourselves many times in a shameful way, right? Before we get to a point of being able
Right.
to process it in a healthy way. Yeah.
Right. But I feel that the things that I have went through with the domestic violence, that I can advocate for others who are not as strong and, are in horrible situations. I can advocate for them and help them out of that situation because I've had the compassion and the empathy, and I've been through that, and I know how you're feeling. And I promise that if you put in the work and you get away from that situation, your life is going to tremendously change, and you're worth it, like when we're in this drug addiction and, my kids being taken away, like I felt like I didn't deserve to be living. I chose men and I chose drugs over my kids. I can hold my head up high and say that today. But before, it was like, I would literally like hold my head down, and I had so much guilt and so much shame from it. But it's, I've turned my pain into my purpose in life. So.
And that's the thing that's so hard, I think, is the realization that not only do I need to just keep living, but I
Right.
get to be me. And I love how you are taking, your own personality and your own strengths into the way that you're doing things.
Right.
To say that
Yeah.
my experience has been that people who are, on that, I don't know, more likely, whatever you want to say, people who are more at risk, whatever, to get pulled into addictive problems. Also times though, either before, after, or during, we develop a lot of like creativity, like necessity is the creator of creativity. Right. And
Right.
so you get into a situation where it's like, if you can manage a drug problem and stay alive and all of that kind of stuff, then usually
there's a reason that you're here. Right.
Yes,
There's a reason you're here.
And if you can, because there's all kinds of things people have to do in order to survive through that. And I love to see that when people tap into that idea of like, oh, I'm probably clever and talented. And now how do I use that? Right.
Right.
In a way now that I'm sober.
Absolutely.
Now,
and that's where like social media and everything comes in. 'Cause I'm like,
that's
you
it's funny. I had a note. I wanted to ask you about that, like how the social media becomes a tool, because a lot of times, we tend to engage with it rather passively and let it lead us around. And so, tell people a little bit about how you use social media, what role that plays for you in your career, your life.
Honestly, like I just use it, going live and just showing people, like when we get into recovery, coming out from an addiction, like we think, oh my God, our life is going to be boring. Like I'm going to be a total square. Sex isn't going to be good. Like I'm never going to have a great relationship. How am I going to have fun in sobriety? Like, and that's where I use my platform, and I do TikToks, and I might look crazy sometimes, but they're fun, and just showing people like who we are minus the drugs and the alcohol. Like I'm the life of the party minus drugs and alcohol. I'm loud and spunky and crazy, and that's what I use my social media for, is just showing other people like, listen. And that's why I say, like, I recover out loud so others don't have to die in silence, and that's what it's about, just showing them that they do matter. So.
Did you find that you had to kind of turn the corner on that? Talking to you now, it's kind of hard to imagine you being like, oh, I got to be boring and not fun and not cool. Or was that always part of your personality enough that, or did you have to learn that too?
No, it was definitely part of my personality. I mean, when I was in my addiction, I was more hush hush, trying to like hide it. But I still had colored hair. I still had piercings and everything. But I was more like very mute. And then it came out again. Like I've always been spunky and outgoing. And, but when I was into drugs, like, it made me hide. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's helpful and exciting to have things out there. I love the emphasis that you have on fun, actually, because I've been talking a lot about this as well. There's this interesting research they've done that activity-based things in therapy and stuff, and just basically getting to engage people in things. When we design it around healing and then try to have a little fun with it, it doesn't work as well as when we design it to be fun and it's about healing, because people will engage with it more. And so, it sounded like that's a lot what you do, is trying to get people to have some enjoyment and joy and fun, whimsy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like the Sober Fest this weekend, just having like a music festival and then we kind of intertwine the whole recovery aspect of it and talk about that and where we've been, so that people can see like, hey, we can change, and this one is more of like a faith-based one. So, there's a lot of God and spirituality and stuff. We have yoga. We're doing yoga there. And we're doing some defense classes. Like they're going to do like a little demo of some defense classes, which is super cool, for the women and stuff like that too. So it's great. Yeah.
Well, I want to tell people about where they can follow you and what they should be doing to be involved with that. I always like to ask people for a suggestion of like a nonprofit or a charity. And as we were talking before the recording, it turns out Crossroads, where you work, they are a nonprofit. And I thought that'd be really cool if you want to tell people a little bit about like a nonprofit residential treatment is a very cool thing, and not always, because usually if people are like, oh, I need residential treatment, great, I'll just plan on being financially wrecked is the next thought, or I just won't do it because of that or whatever. But anyway, can you tell people a little bit about Crossroads Inc.?
So Crossroads is actually a residential treatment center. We have 9 facilities. We're actually in the process of opening our 10th one right now. We are based out of Arizona. We have, like I said, 9 facilities. 8 of them are male facilities. We have 1 female facility out in Mesa, Arizona. And so it is typically a 45-day program for residential. And then they have the option to go to IOP, where they can actually stay at the facility as well and do 45 to 60 days there, and then move into outpatient, where they can basically doing classes 2 to 3 times a week and being able to get a job and work on those life skills. We implement all of that in there. We are a 12-step base. Peer driven, typically the employees that work for Crossroads have actually been through Crossroads. I'm one of few that have not been through Crossroads, but Crossroads is near and dear to my heart. And I believe in the program. I've been around it and I've seen, the success stories, and it's amazing, like I said, we do, it is specific gender. The females stay with the females, the males stay with the males. And then they have, like at our female facility, we actually have a yoga studio. We partnered with Brandon Lee with Art of Our Soul, and he does art therapy. And we've actually trained our employees at Crossroads to teach the art therapy too. So the girls get it. And then also the IOP and outpatient services get to utilize the art studio too and implement that into their curriculum. So
that's very cool.
It's super awesome. They can find us at thecrossroadsinc.org. and that's our website. And then if you're looking, you can find me on Facebook, Christin Day, Instagram, Christin Day, TikTok, Christin Day.
And it's
So
Christin with a CH at the beginning. So everyone knows.
Christin. Yeah, my parents are different. They like to, I've only seen like 3 or 4 people in my life that have it spelled like mine.
There you go.
So
at least it's that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I like to, as I always say, check it out, see if it's something to get involved with. I would say this is one that when people look at, the concept of like I say, a nonprofit treatment is cost prohibitive at that level for so many people.
Right.
And, for those that can, get involved, and as always, if you're not in a situation to be able to donate anything, it costs us nothing. Speaking of social media, to forward something and say, hey, everybody, this is pretty cool. Do this for my birthday, or, and also, if, I always say if all you can give is $1 to $5 to something, imagine
anything is
imagine that imagine 100,000 people out there decided not to because they thought it wasn't very much, right? That's $100,000 to $500,000. I'm showing off my math, pretend math, with pretend numbers. So it's always worth whatever we can do, and when we can do something, then I think it gives us hope. So,
and I just want to throw in there with Crossroads too. We take all insurance plans, all Medicaid, all, we're working on the private insurance right now, and we take people that are not insured. Mm-hmm. So we have federal funding from, a grant here in Arizona where we can actually scholarship people that don't have insurance and are not able to get, the funds, and we put them in. So it doesn't matter what your situation is, we will get you in.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and also the work that you're doing too. Oh, and I should say, Recovery on Air, is that primarily do people find that on all the podcast platforms, YouTube? Where's the best place?
So I'll send you the link for it. I work out of the Dave Pratt studio, so he implements and puts it out for us, and I'll send you the link for it.
Wonderful. Yep, and we'll put that in the show notes as well, with the link for Crossroads. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.